Greetings and salutations to all you folks out there. It is time for the Tech 3 Land tutorial video. Now, just a quick warning on this one. It is going to be a little dry. If you've watched the first two, you know I'm just doing the unit statistics, values, and comparisons with the other factions, you know, the same unit at the same tier. So there's a lot of numbers and a lot of data in this video, and really good information if you want to know how the units work. In a couple of weeks, when I start doing the strategy videos, we'll actually start looking at how to use them and develop a gameplay scenario. So without further ado, let's jump right in, and I will get through these as quickly as I can. Now, Tech 3 with your main combat units, that would be your tanks, bots, and sniper units. There are two pairs, and one pair is UEF and Cybran, and the other pair is Aeon and Seraphim. Now, the reason I say that they're paired is because UEF and Cybran have a heavy assault bot, and then this is a siege assault bot and a heavy assault bot, and then this one is an armored assault bot. Both of these are. And then there is a pair, a lighter weight tank for the Seraphim and the Harbinger for the Aeon, and then they both have a sniper unit. And these are to be used in tandem. They each have strengths and weaknesses, and there's advantages to both sides, and you have to mix well. And going into this, I can tell you that one of the biggest complaints for the Aeon and Seraphim, but more for the Seraphim, is that they're completely underpowered compared to the Brick and Percival. And I'm hoping to dispel a little bit of that as we go over the stats here, and you'll understand why in just a minute. Let's go ahead and jump in with the Brick. Now, the Cybran Brick and the UEF Percival have very similar stats. Both of them cost 12,080 mass, and they have the same power requirements and the same build power. They're both amphibious. They can dive under the water to cross channels, and they both have a very substantial amount of health. The Percival has 9,300 and the Brick has 9,000. The other thing that they have in common is their range. They have a monstrous 35 range, and the Brick, you can see it actually has a torpedo weapon. That thing, let me get the stats real quick here. It does 10 damage per second. So not that great, but it also has an anti-torpedo flare. It only fires once about every 15 seconds, but it does eliminate a torpedo, and a group of bricks paired with a megalith is actually a fairly useful naval tool, especially if you just want to cross the water. So that is something that the Brick is good at. And then the Percival is just a straight up death dealer on the land. It has a 400 damage per second main weapon, front loaded to 1600 per 4 seconds. One shot every 4 seconds with an incredible alpha strike. The Brick, on the other hand, has 375 damage per second, and while it has the same range, it has a much faster firing cycle. It is one projectile every 0.4 seconds, true and steady. You can see that right here. Now, what that's going to lead to, there's the alpha shot, and then you can see this nice little firing pattern here. The Brick is like a walking point defense. It does a much better job of dealing with land units. The Percival actually, mass for mass, gets demolished by Tech 1 land units because it overkills them so massively. And it does a pretty good job of wiping out Tech 2. So, just an interesting little tidbit there. Alright, moving on to the other pair, the Harbinger and the Otham. I have a habit of calling the Seraphim tank the Awful Otham, and that is just a personal preference. I'm sure a lot of you have heard me say it. The reason for me saying that is this thing sits very low to the ground compared to the other two. And it has two separate weapons. Together, they do 400 damage per second, which is the same as the Percival. And now I gotta say, this only costs 840 mass. the Harbinger does as well. And that means that it has way more damage per mass than either of these guys, but it has far less range. Only 25 range on the short cannon and 32 range on the long cannon. The short cannon has 2 guns paired for 300 damage per second, and that is at the same range, roughly, maybe slightly less than the Harbinger. And the reason that I don't like the Otham is the 300 damage per second tied up into those 2 guns right there on top of the wheel wells. You can see them. Those are so low to the ground that they constantly fire into the terrain. This thing has a really hard time firing over obstacles. So that is one thing that you have to remember when using this guy, is that you need to pick and choose your terrain wisely. So when you're traversing something like this, you want to be careful which side you approach from so that you're not firing into a hill. So that is a real quick overview on that. 6,700 health. That puts it roughly on par with the Percival health-wise. Very slow moving, only a 2.5 speed. And actually the Brick and the Percival are slower. I forgot to mention that. They both have 2 top speed. And then that long-range cannon you see there, that actually has a decent 35 or 32 range, packs in a 400 damage alpha shot once every 4 seconds, 100 damage per second. Not the handiest tool in the world, but it will let you kite in that first shot for 400 damage. All right, moving on to the Harbinger. Same cost as the Otham, only has 375 damage per second, but it has an incredibly fast firing pattern. Once every 0.8 seconds, this thing is literally a walking Tech 1 point defense. It behaves in much the same way, and it obliterates pretty much any number of Tech 1 units. A pair of Harbingers microed so that the one with the charged shield is in front can kill 75 or 100 Tech 1 units, as long as you're careful about it and you have good terrain to work with. It has combined 5,900 health, 46 is on the bot, and 1,300 is on a rechargeable shield that regens 9 health per second. So that's a wicked, basically a veterancy boost right off the bat that you can use to your advantage. Now, the biggest thing about the Harbinger is its moving speed. It runs at 3, which is faster than pretty much all of the Tech 2 tanks. The Pillar is of equal speed, and it also outruns all of the T3 bots. So even though this thing has slightly lower health and damage than the others, it can get in and out of situations very quickly. And it also has a cool little thing on it. You cannot actually see anything to do with this, but it can reclaim units. The Harbinger, if put on a patrol order, will run around, and if there's no enemies in the area, it will start reclaiming the terrain, any wrecks, whatever it can get its hands on. So that makes it incredibly useful for cleaning up the mess after a fight has taken place. So that is a quick overview, very quick, of the tanks. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of how they behave. Now, moving on to the complementary direct fire units. Cybran, Loyalist, and the UEF Titan are technically in the same unit category, but they have some very, very major differences. All right, just to list off the straight weaponry. The Loyalist, well, let's do cost first, if I can get my information together here. The Loyalist and the Titan both cost 480 mass, so they are identical in cost, kind of like the other pairs are. The Loyalist, I am pretty sure the Titan is actually faster than what I have on here. I have 4 speed listed for both, but I am fairly positive that the Titan, no, I guess they are the same speed, or very close to it. All right, they both have 4 run speed. That puts these both kind of in a raiding unit class, but I will say that without a doubt, the Loyalist is stronger than the Titan is. Part of that is to do with the damage per second. The Loyalist has a couple of guns that total out to about 190 damage per second, and it has a pretty good range of usefulness in that, because you can see the range circles there. The Loyalist has a lot more reach than the Titan does. Another thing that the Loyalist has is a death weapon. On its death, it releases an EMP blast, which stuns all of the units in a range about this big. So if you're walking in a mass of units and that EMP blast goes off, all of the units around it are stunned for a couple of seconds, and that gives a boost to the other Loyalists or bricks in the formation. Another thing that the EMP blast does is it disables the Galactic Colossus. You know how the Galactic Colossus pulls units in with the Tractor Claw? Well, if it sucks up a Loyalist, when the Loyalist dies in the Tractor Claw, it stuns the Galactic Colossus. So that is a very handy thing to remember. If you can put Loyalists in front of bricks running up to Galactic Colossus, the Colossus will suck up the Loyalist first and stun itself. So a really handy sacrificial tool there. This thing has 3,100 health as opposed to 3,400 health total on the Titan. Part of that is in a shield, 1,200 HP to be exact. The shield has about 9 health per second regen, and then the Titan has 166 damage per second. Now, there is a difference on the firing cycle. The Loyalist has about a 3.5 second firing cycle, firing 3 projectiles. So it's not exactly front loaded. Let me get my, there we go, we can watch them. Alright, this steady on weapon only does 30 damage per second, and then most of the damage is in this triple shot right here. Whereas the Titan fires a continuous stream, and this makes it good for dealing with Tech 1 and to a very, very minor degree Tech 2, but honestly the Titan starts to suck at the Tech 2 level. This is not a very extremely useful unit other than raiding, because it can get in and out of situations very, very quickly. So this is something that you want to use to raid eco and to front your Percivals if you're still dealing with some Tech 1 spam or Tech 2 spam, because that's what's going to hinder your Percival. The Titan is a complement to that. The Loyalist doesn't really have to complement the brick, because the brick can take care of itself. So this is a unit in its own right. And something that is cool about the Loyalist is that it has a special ability. It is a tac defense. This thing, it is a very short range tac defense, only, you know, about probably slightly smaller than the Aeon tac defense system. And it is a boomerang defense. If a tac missile comes down on top of the Loyalist, if I had thought about this before the video, I would have shown you this happening. This thing can deflect tac missiles directly back to the target where they originated. That includes a couple of Loyalists together can deflect a Billy back to target. A couple of Loyalists can completely deny 2 or 3 Seraphim cruisers and 1 or 2 UEF cruisers, and those tac missiles go back to the origination point. So very handy tool there. You have to be pretty good at predicting where things are going to hit, because the range is so tiny on that, but it is there. Alright, that was a little longer than I wanted to spend on those. Moving on to the sniper bots. Both of these cost 640 mass, which you will notice is slightly more than these guys, and they have a couple of similarities, other than the cost, of course. They both move at a 3 rate of speed, which means they are slightly more maneuverable than the majority of the T3 main assault units, and they're very long-range units. Now, these fit into the faction designs because the Tech 3 tanks for Aeon and Seraphim fail miserably versus the Brick and the Percival. They cannot hold up, mainly due to the superior range of these 2 units. However, if you field a couple of mobile shields and these sniper bots, these snipers recently were rebalanced, and one of their new features is that they can fire while moving with decent accuracy. It will not hit 100% of the time, but it will hit. and then with near 100% accuracy when they're standing still. So you can use these guys to deal preemptive damage against the Percival and Brick swarms as they're coming in, and then use your Otham Harbinger to clean up any of them that dare come too close. Another thing that is cool about these sniper bots is you can actually use them as an early naval denial tool. If you have Tech 3 and you've pushed a couple of these things out and your opponent is harassing your shoreline with Tech 2 Navy, both of these completely outrange the Seraphim and UEF destroyers. And then this is 70 and 75 range versus the 80 of the Aeon and Cybern destroyers. Now, that is a close enough gap that you can manipulate the destroyers into being shot if you have these guys directly on the shore and the destroyers are firing something just a little bit up on the shore. You can reach out and hit them. And then 4 sniper bots will one-hit kill any Tech 2 naval unit other than the bulwark, the shield. You have to take the shield down first. So that is a very handy tool. Now the Aeon sniper bot is just a sniper bot. You can see here it has a normal range ring. It fires once every 7 seconds with a 950 damage projectile. So very slow rate of fire, very high alpha strike. The Seraphim bot, on the other hand, and let me park these guys real close together and let you see the range rings. The Seraphim bot, there we go. I can show now. This one has 2 firing modes. The default is the smaller red ring here, and it has a faster firing cycle, 5 seconds, with a 500 damage projectile. So it is a little bit better at dealing with the large numbered armies because it can reload faster and retarget faster than the Aeon. But it has a slightly shorter range and does slightly less damage per second, 116 damage versus 135. However, if you toggle the firing mode, you can see that after you toggle, it has 5 more range than the Aeon. But it swaps, you end up with even more reload time. It only fires once every 14.3 seconds, which is enormous. But it does 2,000 damage per shot on 75 range. This guy is a monster if you can get a clean shot at an ACU. Just a handful of them can quickly strip off 3/4 or the entirety of an enemy ACU. If he's already weakened from another hit, if he's down, 7,000 health, 4 of these guys, 1 shot, he's toast. So that is something that you can bear in mind. And then remember that these guys pair well as a support unit to the weaker Tech 3 tanks for Aeon and Seraphim, whereas UEF and Cybern have the stronger T3 bots, and then they have the complementary raiding units. So that is the matchup for the direct fire units. That took a little while to explain, but there's a lot of information there, so hopefully I did not bore you to tears. All right. Let's go to Tech 3 mobile artillery, because that is one that everyone is quite fond of. Now, I have 4 fire bases here, with each one of these artillery targeted directly on the support commander in the corresponding fire base. So in a second, I will trip them, and we will watch them fire and see how they compare. Now, as far as the stats go, let me whip out my little sheet here. All right. Let's start with Aeon, which is this little guy right here, the Serenity. It is a unique T3 mobile artillery. It is the only one that can fire while moving, although it does have a slightly higher chance of missing if it is moving than it does if it is stationary. All of the artillery cost 800 mass, and they all have 90 range. So let's just get that out of the way, and that is a consistent factor. They have very slight variations in health, but it is pretty negligible, and they all have 2.5 run speed. So there you go on that. All right, the Aeon artillery is it only fires once every 20 seconds, which is huge. However, it has the second highest damage per second at 71, and that projectile does a total of 1,425 damage, and it has a very small area of effect, only 3, but it is pinpoint precise, and we'll see that in action here in just a second. So true to the Aeon faction philosophy, very precise, very low AoE, very high damage. Alright, this is the Seraphim. Actually, let's do Cybern because it is the other unique one. This is the Cybern Trebuchet. Kind of a cool looking unit. That is personally my favorite one, just because it looks kind of like a insect with the pincers on the front. But that aside. Alright, the Trebuchet fires at the fastest rate. Once every 6.7 seconds. It has the lowest damage per second at 67. The Alpha Strike is 450, which is quite low. However, this thing has a monster of an AoE. 7 area of effect, which is absolutely brutal versus groups of units. And it is very inaccurate. I was trying to think exactly how inaccurate it is as a comparison, but just know that if you're trying to hit a single target, this thing will miss all day long, but the splash damage will hit what you're aiming at a lot of the time, and it will decimate a large area around it. So you want to use this on crowds of units. Not necessarily the best thing ever against fire bases, but it still does its job. Alright, UEF and Seraphim are very similar. They both have a 10-second firing cycle. The UEF has higher damage, 75 damage per second for 750 strike, and the Seraphim has 70 damage per second for 700 damage strike. The difference comes in the area of effect. With the higher damage, the UEF Demolisher only has 4 area of effect, only very slightly more than the Aeon, and the Seraphim has 6 AoE, which is only slightly less than the Cybern. And then the UEF is going to be the more accurate of the two. Seraphim is going to have a little more inaccuracy, but the higher area of effect to make up for it. So you can kind of see a trend there. Technically, all things are equal. They just excel in different areas. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the ground fire back on, and we will observe the firing cycle. There is the simultaneous first shot. And remember that they're targeted on the SACU. There is the second shot for the Cybern. So you can see it is vastly outfiring the others as far as the sheer number of projectiles. Aeon still has not refired. Should have left the speed on so that I could zip through this without having to watch the entire thing. Alright. Shields are not going to go down, so I am just going to take all these offline so that we can see what happens. Alright, this is the Cybern hit. You can see the area of effect damaged pretty much everything on this side of the base. There's the UEF hit, only damaged the 2 centers, so that is the area of effect there. The Aeon hit, and it only killed the TAC defense, but it laid down a ton of damage on that TAC defense and mutilated it. You can see there's nothing missing off the other buildings. And then we're going to see the Seraphim come in. It is going to hit, and it's going to damage 4 buildings and the SACU. Not quite as big as what the Cybern was doing, but it is a good area of effect. And that one's just going to damage this. So you can kind of get an idea of how the artillery is firing. And you can see the accuracy on the Aeon. It is striking pretty dang close to the target all of the time. The UEF one is as well, pretty much hitting dead on target. And then the Cybern is all over the map. We have one way up here. The first shot was way over here. And then we have damage down here. That one was clear up there. So you can see how wide the variance is on that. Seraphim is a little bit more precise, but not a whole lot. Alrighty, that is all of those units. I can stop that there. This is going drastically over what I had planned in my allotted time, but so be it. We're on a learning spree. Alright, stop those guys. Last group, special units. Alright, Seraphim has a Tech 3 mobile shield. This guy is a boss. It hovers. You can use it to cover your navy. Of course, shields are actually a bubble. Half of your bubble is in the ground when the thing is on the surface, so that bubble extends underneath the water once you get out in the ocean, and that blocks torpedoes. So this is a very handy tool to pair with the Cybran Navy. I would go so far as to say you will lose Seraphim, sorry, not Cybran, Seraphim Navy if you do not build mobile shields. You have a very large 20 size and a whopping 10,000 health per shield. They only cost about 540 mass, so they are fairly expensive, but like all Seraphim shields, they have absolutely beastly health stats and the largest area coverage. So that is a good thing to have. Seraphim does not have a Tech 2 mobile shield. They push it out to Tech 3. This is the UEF Spearhead. Now the Spearhead has 80 range, which is 10 shorter than the mobile artillery, but it has some pretty good bonuses. This is a mobile missile launcher, and it has a very interesting firing pattern. You can watch it here. Fires 3 TAC missiles close together, which can potentially overwhelm a single TAC defense. I believe it only shoots down 2, and the third one hits a lot of the time. The projectiles fire once every 10 seconds, doing 2,400 damage, 800 per missile. So this thing has a absolute load of damage per second. It's 240 damage per second, about double what a Tech 3 artillery produces for less mass. This thing only costs 400 mass. And something cool you can do with this unit, if you put it on hold fire and get 3 or 4 of them, you can target something and then undo the hold fire at the same time. And when the first missile hits, there's not enough time to dodge the AoE in the time it takes from the first to the third missile to hit. And that's 2,400 damage per firing cycle. So you can add the 2,400s together, get however many you need to kill a target, fire them all at once, and your enemy can't do anything about it. So that's a pretty cool sniping mechanism. These things do very easily overwhelm TMD in groups because of this grouped firing cycle, and are a good fire base breaker. Very good. Another one of UEF's master tools in that area. Alright, that is the Spearhead. I think that was all I wanted to say on that. And last, but certainly not least, is the Aeon Absolver. This is probably the single most underused unit in the game, and it is the one that probably is most useful to Aeon in certain situations. Now this thing does a whopping 5, count it, 5 damage per second. The gun is absolutely useless. It costs 420 mass and has 1,200 health, and it can hover, so this thing can cross the water. Now what the Absolver does very well is break shields. And I am going to attack this guy right here and swap so you can see what is happening. Alright, you see that? 1,300 damage per second against shields. 1,300. And then it actually starts hitting the target and starts blinking away at 5. This thing is a monster. Versus Navy, you can break your entire opponent's Navy shielding in a matter of seconds with a handful of Absolvers. If you're going versus a Rambo ACU that has the personal shield, you can pair the Absolver with some sniper bots, absolutely melt his shield with that 1,300 damage shot, and then kill the commander with the sniper bots once the shield is down. It is very good at that. Another thing, this gives Aeon a leg up versus the UEF in Firebase Wars because the Absolver has the same range, I'm sorry, 5 more range than the UEF Ravager. So if your opponent is going Ravager spam behind shields, you can get a combination of sniper bots or Tech 3 mobile artillery, and these guys, and you can remove any shielding that any obstacle that the shielding gives you. I cannot talk straight. This is a hassle. All right. So that is the last of the special units, the last of the Tech 3 units, and if you stuck with me through this entire extremely lengthy video, kudos to you. You now know just about everything about Tech 3 units, and hopefully you can put that to good use. All right, after this video, I have one more. We are going to talk about the ACUs and upgrades in probably the beginning of next week, and then after that, it is time for the overall game strategies. I will do naval and air later on at some point. I will get it done, just not now. And I know that you guys are ready and raring to go on the getting to use these units. Get them out there and see how they perform. So we'll jump into that as quick as we possibly can. Alrighty, that is going to wrap it up for this video. I will see you guys later.